Hello and welcome back to another episode of World Traveler Cooking. This week we're going to make Bakso Sapi. These are beef meatballs from Indonesia, and there are a couple of interesting things about these. Oftentimes you'll find them with little pieces of tendon added for a little extra texture. But basically usually you eat this as part of a noodle soup. So we'll make the bakso and then I'm not going to bother making my own noodles today, but we could. Now, normally, of course, you would use like a rice noodle or, basically a basic noodle like this. So this is what we'll use. But as far as the bakso goes, I have 1 kilogram of beef shank, and it still has some of the tendons attached, so we'll get to add some tendon to it also. I have 200 grams of tapioca flour, sago flour, or in a pinch cornstarch would work. I have 8 cloves of garlic. 4 of these will be sliced thin and fried, and then powdered, and we'll add that. And then we'll add some fried onions. These are bawang goreng. These are basically fried shallots. We will also add some white pepper and some salt, a couple teaspoons of each, and 2 green onions. I will also add 200 grams or so of ice cubes to help manage temperature and some other things. And then when we make the soup, as I say, we'll make it with these noodles. We'll top it off possibly with some more green onions, some sambal, and some vinegar. And we'll use the broth that we boil the bakso. So let's go ahead and get started. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to slice my meat very thin against the grain. Since I'm working with shank, we don't want it to get tough, but shank has a really nice texture for this, so we're going to slice it thin against the grain and against the fascia pieces, and then we'll get ready for the next step. So here we go. So I have sliced this. So if you look at shank, one of the things you'll notice is that the fascia have a grain that runs one direction, like here, and while the internal grain runs perpendicular to it, from fascia to fascia. This is one of the things that makes this really good meat for meatballs, but we don't want these membrane pieces to be too strong, which is why I sliced it against that. And then I have sliced 4 cloves of garlic very thin, and now I will fry these. Once they're fried, then we'll be ready to start the process of actually making the meatballs. So we're heating up some neutral oil, and while it's heating up, I'm just going to add the garlic to it. We'll just fry this until it starts to turn golden brown, then we'll fish it out and dry it. So these are just turning a little bit brown here. I think that's good. I really don't want to overdo these and have them come out burned. I think that'd be a disaster. So I think we're good here. We'll separate these off and go ahead and get our meatballs going. So first into the food processor is going to go my alliums. So I have the fried garlic here, I have the fresh garlic here. One of those garlic cloves split up and the other one had a small rider clove attached, so that's why there looks like there's 6. The white part of the 2 green onions, and then basically about a handful or so of fried shallots. So these will be the first things in, and then after that we'll add our salt and pepper, I think, and we'll start adding in the meat and the ice cubes. So in goes about 2 large teaspoons of salt, maybe 3, let's do 3, and then 1 to 2 large teaspoons of white pepper, and we'll start with this. We may mix in more later if we decide we need to. So I'll mix this together and I'll be back. You probably don't want to just watch me run that, so. I'm going to start with these pieces of tendon. We like to work with the meat while it's cold. So this is why we use ice cubes. I'll probably add an ice cube in at this point, or maybe a little bit of extremely cold water. See if this ice cube's melted a little bit. So a little bit here, and put it in, and I'll blend this up until it's nice and smooth, and we'll just keep working from there. Once this is all done, once I have all this mixed in, I'll be back. Now, I'm about 2/3 of the way done with the meat, so I'm going to do two things here. I'm going to add some part of my sago or tapioca flour. This is just to kind of keep the consistency under control. And then I'm going to add some baking powder, which I forgot to talk about before. Now, it's fairly common to see baking soda used in meat dishes in Asia, but I haven't seen very many places use baking powder. Now, the reason to use baking powder here is that on one hand you get the softening characteristics of the baking soda, but also baking powder is a pH neutral buffer, and so it will avoid alkalizing things too much. So I need to let my hand blender rest a moment, and then I'll be back to keep blending stuff together. So once everything's blended together pretty nicely, I'm going to use wet hands, and I'm going to basically form little balls, meatballs, whatever size you want. I think this will be a good size. And I'm just going to set them aside while I boil my water. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm probably going to do these in batches. I think maybe 1/3 of this at once, or maybe 2/3, or maybe half. I'm not sure. We'll see. But this will definitely be done in batches. Then they will get boiled in seasoned water, and we'll actually use the broth that comes out of that as the basis for the soup. So the water is now boiling, so I'm going to add my meatballs, and we're going to stew them in this water until 5 minutes after they float. That way we know they're done all the way through. And I think this is about the maximum amount I can cook in this pot at once. So I will go back to making more meatballs while I wait for these to cook. Okay, so these are now floating, so they have 5 more minutes to cook. In the meantime, I'm going to start the noodles and get ready to start my next batch. So now it's been 5 minutes, so I'm just going to pull all these out. And I'll start the next batch while we wait for the water to boil for the noodles. So into our boiling water goes our noodles. And just like Italians, I'm not going to break these. I'm just going to let them soften, and I'll fold them over. We'll get them all underwater pretty quickly, and then pretty soon I'll be able to do the whole soup. So to assemble our plate, we're just going to take some of the meatballs and we will place them on top of the noodles. The noodles do not have to be fully done because they will continue to cook a bit in the broth. Take this one out. There we go. So I have, I'll put that one on. So I have 7 noodles here. And next I will put some broth on, and then we'll top it with green onions. So broth, more or less, however much you'd like. And top it off with some green onions. This is both for color and for flavor. Also for color and flavor, I've added some fried shallots, and now I'm ready for the taste test. And now for the taste test. So very oftentimes they will serve this with something called jeruk songkit, which I don't have today, so I'm just going to use vinegar. This is this is like 25% acidity, so use it sparingly. If you're using 5% acidity, you could use it more generously. I'm just going to stir in a very little bit of this sambal. I also have a video on how to make sambal bakso, but my sambal bakso is a bit more fluid than this. So mix this together nicely in the broth and stir things together well, because the last thing you want is one bite that's super sour and the next bite that is super spicy. So now, and of course in Asia, people usually use their spoon as a knife, cultural reasons, an aversion to having knives as weapons on the table, I think. This is very, very tasty. The flavors, I just can't describe it. It's well spiced. The sourness from the vinegar gives it something. This is just delicious. It may be a bit of work to make, but it is well worth it. I highly recommend this. So, if you find this content interesting, please like, share, and subscribe. Helps make it possible for me to do more of these videos. And if you make a dish like this and you make it a little differently, please leave a message in the comments. I will say that this style with the pieces of tendon is called Bakso Sapi Urat. Urat is for tendon. I like it this way. It has a great texture. If you don't like the tough pieces of tendon in it, you can make it out of round instead, and just like trim off the silver skin. And you don't even have to trim off the silver skin, actually. Just slice the silver skin against the grain finely, and you're fine. At any rate, recipes in the description. Bon appetit, and see you next week.